The first signal arrived without warning, a whisper carved into the cosmic background that no natural source could explain. It wasn't the hiss of a pulsar or the rhythm of a quasar. It was a lattice of perfect primes wrapped in a carrier wave so precise it silenced every control room from Cape Town to Kyoto. For the first hour, scientists argued over instruments, convinced it had to be a malfunction. By the second, they stopped arguing. No known physics produced a pattern like that by accident. Governments scrambled while the public devoured rumors in real time. Screens lit with countdowns and speculative headlines. First contact imminent. Conspiracy boards turned into open war zones of theories. Ancient aliens, divine messengers, or some covert military stunt. But inside the encrypted networks of the world's space agencies, excitement burned hotter than fear. Humanity had waited for this call since Marconi first scattered radio into the void. Now the void had answered. The signal came from a single point near the edge of the Perseus arm, too clean to be anything but intentional, too distant to dismiss. Triangulation locked the origin at a star system catalogued but never explored. Within a day, a coalition of agencies drafted an audacious plan, a manned intercept using the Astrea, humanity's fastest experimental vessel. No debate over politics or national flags slowed the decision. The message's perfection left no room for hesitation. Everyone wanted to know who or what was waiting. Crew selection became a race against both time and human pride. Specialists from 5 continents boarded under strict anonymity. Navigator, physicist, engineer, linguist, pilot, medic. Their names mattered less than their disciplines. Cameras never revealed faces. The mission was larger than individuals. They became archetypes of the species, a collective answer to a cosmic invitation. Within 72 hours, Astrea left lunar drydock, its fusion drives igniting with a silver blaze visible from Earth's night side. As the ship accelerated past the heliopause, the signal strengthened, almost as if the source knew they were coming. Instruments measured microvariations in the primes, a shifting rhythm that defied encryption yet hinted at intent. Linguists compared it to music, a melody built from mathematics. Some swore they heard an undercurrent of harmony when frequencies were transposed into audible range. Others dismissed that as human pattern-seeking, the mind's urge to find meaning even in chaos. Weeks blurred into the timeless dark. Without gravity's tug or Earth's rotation, the crew lived by the heartbeat of engines and the relentless pulse of the alien broadcast. They catalogued every fluctuation, every spike in amplitude, searching for a message beyond the numbers. Sleep cycles shortened. Conversations shrank to clipped exchanges. Even with strict psychological protocols, the sense of being observed gnawed at the edges of discipline. It felt less like listening and more like being measured. On the 47th day, the stars around them shimmered with an impossible distortion. At first it registered as a sensor glitch, a lensing effect caused by distant mass. But calculations refused to agree. Space itself quivered as if stretched by invisible hands. The pilot cut thrust, letting Astrea drift while the physicist recalibrated the arrays. No error. Something immense warped the local vacuum, a ripple that bent light in fractal spirals. It was not on any chart, not visible to optical scans, yet instruments screamed of a presence larger than planets. Then came the reply. Not a radio burst. Not light. A pulse detonated across every system simultaneously, riding on quantum channels no antenna could block. Consoles flickered. Displays bled static in perfect sync. The signal bypassed encryption and spoke directly to the ship's core processors, rewriting diagnostic code before human fingers could react. Every indicator shifted to a single repeating symbol, a pattern of intersecting curves no mathematician had ever seen. The crew acted in silence, hands flying over manual cutoffs, isolating circuits, yanking fuses like surgeons cauterizing a wound. Analog backups kicked in, but the pulse kept echoing through isolated subsystems as if it had leapt beyond wires into the very logic of matter. power levels dipped, returned, dipped again, the rhythm eerily matched to the original prime lattice. It wasn't a greeting. It was intrusion, an assessment running through the marrow of their technology. Outside the viewport, darkness folded into itself. For an instant the stars vanished, swallowed by a shadow shaped like architecture. Towers of void braided with lightning, a geometry that defied Euclid and mocked gravity. No engine fired, yet the construct drew closer, or perhaps expanded around them. Every wavelength of light bent toward its edges and died. The ship's artificial night deepened until the crew could feel the cold as a pressure in their bones. Heart rates spiked. The medic triggered emergency dampeners to keep panic hormones from clouding thought. The navigator plotted escape vectors only to find spacetime itself misaligned, every potential trajectory collapsing into the singular presence ahead. Communication arrays fired a hail of universal greetings, mathematical constants, hydrogen spectra, prime-coded visuals, but the void cathedral remained mute. Only the steady, invasive pulse answered, a cosmic heartbeat that synchronized with the Astria's own systems. For the first time since launch, silence filled the cabin not as protocol but as dread. They had sought conversation and found a predator. No human face betrayed the fear. Suits and helmets turned them into anonymous silhouette. Yet every breath carried the same realization: they were not exploring, they were being evaluated. When the next surge hit, stronger and more precise, the ship shuddered. Instruments flared and died. Gravity inside the hull shifted by degrees, a subtle tilt that felt like the planet's pull had been reprogrammed. The engineer wrestled manual overrides, severing automated regulators, forcing ancient mechanical valves to keep life support stable. Sparks showered as analog safeguards, relics of a more primitive era, proved more resilient than quantum systems. Then, as abruptly as it began, the intrusion ceased. Systems steadied, though none of the crew relaxed. Outside, the shadow construct loomed, motionless yet oppressive, a question carved into the cosmos. The prime lattice still pulsed, softer now, like a breath waiting for a reply. In that hanging moment, humanity's first contact was no triumph, no handshake among the stars. It was an unspoken ultimatum delivered in absolute silence. They had crossed the threshold of the unknown and discovered that the universe was not merely alive, it was watching, and it had just looked back. Silence clung to the Astrea like a second hull. The alien pulse had stopped, but its afterimage still flickered across instruments, a phantom resonance that made every diagnostic suspect. Outside, the immense construct hovered in the starless dark, a lattice of living metal that seemed to drink light. Sensors failed to define its dimensions. Every reading contradicted the last, as if the thing refused to be measured. The crew worked without words. Voices felt intrusive, almost disrespectful before something that immense. Hands darted across consoles, sealing compartments, rerouting power, checking analog backups. The engineer bypassed the ship's nervous system to keep essential systems alive, running thick copper through manual relays like veins of defiance. Static crawled along the hull, a faint blue shimmer that bent magnetics into strange harmonics. Nothing attacked, yet every nerve screamed that they were under siege. A soft vibration rippled through the deck plates. Instruments logged no thrust, no external impact. The sensation came from space itself, a flexing of the void that nudged the ship like an unseen tide. Gravity swayed a fraction and steadied, then swayed again. The navigator's calculations unraveled. Star maps warped in real time, constellations stretching as if reality were a fabric being kneaded by an invisible hand. The medic tightened harness straps as heart rates spiked across the cabin. Then a new signal slid through the silence. A low-frequency hum that bypassed every receiver and resonated directly in bone. It wasn't sound so much as vibration of thought, a pressure behind the eyes, whispering in perfect prime intervals. The linguist's face remained hidden behind a visor, but a quick gesture called for recording. No one could capture it. Microphones registered only a flat void while minds pulsed with the rhythm. The crew shared a single unspoken certainty: this was not communication as they knew it. It was scrutiny. Energy readings surged without source. Panels brightened and dimmed in a heartbeat. Outside, the construct unfolded. Petal-like segments pivoted outward, revealing an interior of swirling radiance, a geometry of curves that rewrote depth perception. From its center, thin filaments of pure light extended toward the ship, moving with deliberate precision. They stopped a kilometer short, yet the ship's shields flared as if touched by a solar flare. Temperatures spiked. Alarms triggered and fell silent as systems were overridden one by one. The pilot throttled thrusters for a controlled retreat. Engines fired, but momentum died as if the ship were embedded in invisible resin. Power output peaked. Velocity stayed zero. Space around them had no traction. Gravity vectors looped back on themselves, turning acceleration into stillness. Every law of motion bent beneath an alien will. A sudden shockwave of data stormed the ship's core. Not electromagnetic, not gravitational, a quantum intrusion that leapt past every firewall like a thought crossing a synapse. Diagnostic text cascaded across screens in alien glyphs, each symbol morphing faster than eyes could track. The linguist attempted pattern recognition, only to find the characters rewriting themselves mid-analysis. It wasn't a message to decipher. It was a command running live inside the processors. The engineer slammed mechanical isolators, slicing power to non-critical decks, plunging half the ship into darkness. For a heartbeat the intrusion faltered, then reassembled, adapting. Analog gauges twitched as though magnetized by an unseen pulse. The ship groaned under forces no equation could explain, a resonance that vibrated through steel and bone alike. Oxygen generators hiccuped and steadied, life support lagging just enough to draw sharp, synchronized breaths from every throat. Without warning, the external cameras came alive, not with captured light but with an image imposed from nowhere, an expanding sphere of cold fire, infinite and depthless. It pulsed in time with the alien lattice, a silent panorama of impossible stars. The crew stared, transfixed. The sphere's surface rippled with symbols forming and dissolving like thoughts testing themselves. Each change struck the human brain as almost meaningful, a near language that lured comprehension and then shredded it. Minds reached and recoiled, left with the bitter taste of incompletion. A tremor of intuition passed through the team. This was not an invitation. It was analysis, a probe of cognition itself. The construct wasn't reading their instruments, it was reading them. Neural scans lit across the medic's display without sensors attached. Heart rates, brainwaves, subconscious spikes all mirrored in real time, though no equipment gathered the data. The entity was inside the electrical whisper of their thoughts. Instinct replaced protocol. The pilot killed all automated systems, leaving only raw manual controls. The ship floated, a silent husk powered by the muscle memory of human hands. The intrusion faltered, as though confusion rippled through the alien presence. Unpredictability, illogic, had entered the equation. But the reprieve lasted seconds. A sudden pressure gripped the ship, a force like gravity but sharper, tugging at the molecular lattice of the hull. Metal moaned. Bolts groaned. The deck flexed. Light fractured around them as if space itself were bending toward a single point. The navigator's analog compass spun uselessly. No star field remained outside, only the vast architecture of the construct, its surfaces now alive with cascading luminescence, like a living algorithm written across the sky. The engineer triggered a failsafe, venting a burst of high-energy plasma to disrupt local field. For a breath, the grip loosened. The pilot seized the moment, firing manual thrusters in a chaotic, randomized pattern, a dance of impulses without mathematical prediction. The ship jerked erratically, a motion devoid of strategy. The alien force hesitated. Instruments flickered between 0 and infinity. The crew clung to harnesses, trusting that unpredictability might be their only language of survival. Then the hum ceased. The bone-deep vibration vanished, leaving a void louder than thunder. The construct remained, but its filaments withdrew, folding inward like petals at dusk. The stars reappeared around the edges of the darkness. Space's normal geometry reasserted itself, though sensors still recorded impossible values, negative distances, fractional time deltas. The ship floated free yet not free, like a leaf released but still watched. No celebration followed. The crew knew the encounter hadn't ended, it had only paused. Their instruments, stripped of alien interference, began a slow recalibration. Each reading whispered a single conclusion: the entity could return at will. Nothing they possessed, not speed, not firepower, not diplomacy, could prevent it. And yet they were alive. The construct had chosen observation over annihilation, hesitation over conquest. The linguist finally spoke, voice low enough to feel like a breach of sacred quiet. The words were simple, almost reverent. "It knows us now." No one replied. Beyond the viewport, the alien structure drifted without motion, a cathedral of shadow and light carved into eternity. Its silence felt heavier than its power. The first contact of humankind had become a silent duel of intellect and will, and for reasons no one could name, the duel had ended, for now, with survival. Minutes stretched into something shapeless as the crew steadied the Astrea. Instruments flickered between erratic numbers and blank silence, the aftermath of an alien presence that had reached into every circuit and neuron. They floated free, but no one trusted the stillness. The construct remained in the darkness, its petals of black metal faintly luminous, as though holding a breath. The engineer sifted through data streams on an isolated analog console, pencil tracing patterns by hand. Digital systems remained unreliable, only graphite and paper obeyed human intent. Random spikes in residual energy formed strange rhythms, but the linguist saw no language, only a mirrored echo of the chaotic thruster maneuvers that had broken the alien grip. Their randomness had left a fingerprint, and that fingerprint puzzled the construct. The realization settled like gravity. The entity expected predictability. Every species it had studied before, if such species existed, must have followed patterns that bent toward logic. Humans, in their panic, had acted without symmetry, creating noise no algorithm could forecast. That unpredictability was a shield no technology could replicate. The pilot proposed no plan aloud. A glance was enough. They would embrace disorder as a weapon. The navigator ripped apart standard star charts, feeding false vectors into dormant guidance subsystems. The engineer reconfigured life support controls to fluctuate within safe but erratic ranges, a dance of pressure and temperature changes designed to appear senseless. Every predictable rhythm, oxygen cycling, reactor pulses, even heartbeat monitors, was broken into deliberate chaos. Through the viewports, the alien construct pulsed once, a slow flare of violet across its fractal surface. It was a question, a test, perhaps a warning. In response, the Astrea broadcast a storm of nonsense. Prime sequences interrupted by random decimals, sudden reversals in carrier waves, bursts of static shaped like impossible ratios. It was not communication but defiance, an orchestration of deliberate irrationality. Sensors caught a new ripple. Space trembled with another gravitational shiver, sharper than before, as though the construct tightened its invisible grip. Panels rattled. The hull creaked. Yet the ship's new pattern of chaos held, an asymmetry that refused to give the entity a foothold. Readings suggested it was probing again, seeking correlations. Every spike met deliberate dissonance. The medic monitored the crew for strain. Sleep deprivation metrics climbed, adrenaline thinned into exhaustion, but the tactic demanded constant human improvisation. Automated routines could not generate true chaos. Only the human mind, driven by intuition and sudden leaps, could stay ahead of a system designed to predict. Fingers drummed irregular beats on metal rails. Thruster bursts fired at odd intervals, a staccato heartbeat of defiance. Hours bled together. The construct shifted color, patterns of light racing across its vast petals in dizzying cascades. At times it shimmered like liquid mercury, at others it froze into a silhouette of stone. Data streams on the engineer's board resembled living storms, values folding back on themselves, impossible negatives, half-measured infinities. Yet the ship held steady, guided by a logic that was no logic at all. The linguist whispered a sudden insight. The entity might not be hostile in the human sense. Perhaps it was cataloging, testing the boundaries of consciousness, expecting intelligence to follow certain universal rules. Humanity's refusal to conform might be the very thing saving them. The idea hardened into resolve. Their survival depended on staying strange. They pushed further. The pilot plotted a microburn that looped the ship in an erratic spiral, neither escape nor approach, a movement pattern with no mathematical elegance. The engineer sabotaged her own stabilizers, creating microvibrations that pulsed like random drumbeats through the hull. Even the ship's limited AI, now isolated and heavily constrained, was fed contradictory commands, so it produced nothing but garbled static. The construct reacted. Massive segments rotated, shedding a rain of sparks that looked like falling stars. A low-frequency rumble vibrated through the void, felt in the chest rather than heard. For a heartbeat, gravity warped again, compressing bones, then eased as if reconsidering. Then came a different intrusion, not violent but curious. Instead of forcing its way into systems, it mirrored the ship's chaos. Displays filled with fluctuating symbols that refused repetition, like an alien attempt to mimic human unpredictability. But the imitation betrayed itself. Its randomness followed subtle fractal rhythms, too elegant to fool the human eye. The crew countered with even sharper disorder, overlapping frequencies, sudden silence, bursts of nonsense code shouted into the dark. The duel stretched on until the alien mimicry faltered. The symbols dissolved into formless light, and the construct's pulsing slowed. One by one its petals folded inward, the violet glow dimming to ash-gray shadow. The gravitational haze around the Astrea thinned until stars returned with familiar clarity. The pilot cut all output, letting momentum drift them beyond the last detectable filament of alien energy. Instruments steadied. The background hum of the universe resumed. For the first time in hours, the crew exhaled as one. No one claimed victory. They hadn't beaten a foe, they had bewildered an intellect so vast it might have spanned galaxies. The engineer recorded final diagnostics with trembling hands, noting every erratic variable that had contributed to their survival. The navigator logged a route home using manual bearings only, rejecting automated guidance as if the construct might still be listening. In the quiet that followed, a new understanding took root. Humanity's greatest strength was not perfect logic or flawless technology. It was the capacity for sudden leaps, for irrational invention, for chaos that defied expectation. The crew did not speak of triumph. They spoke of strangeness, of the power in unpredictability. The linguist captured the thought with spare words: survival through the unexplainable. It was not a motto for banners or broadcasts. It was a private recognition that in the endless, calculating cold of the cosmos, the human refusal to be a simple equation might be the only true weapon. The construct remained behind them, a silent riddle suspended among the stars. Whether it had learned, relented, or merely grown bored, no one could say. But it had not followed. For now, the darkness belonged to them again, and their chaotic path through it was the answer the universe could not predict. Stars drifted back into familiar constellations as the Astrea coasted beyond the last tremor of alien gravity. The void no longer vibrated with hidden music, yet every mind aboard remained tuned to an inaudible frequency, waiting for a return pulse that never came. Silence did not mean safety. It meant the universe had paused, watching, calculating. The pilot eased the ship into a slow trajectory toward the nearest navigation beacon. Manual controls only, no automated guidance, no algorithms to betray a pattern. Every thruster burn was plotted by hand, each angle a quiet act of defiance. The engineer locked down the remaining quantum cores and transferred control to mechanical backup. Analog clocks ticked like steady heartbeats, each click a reminder that unpredictability had saved them once and might be their only shield again. A status report scrolled across a dim console. Hull stress minimal, life support stable, communications patchy but functional. Numbers looked ordinary, but the crew read them like omens. Normality felt counterfeit after the Cathedral of Darkness. They did not celebrate. They simply worked, a silent compact to keep their victory unspoken, as if words might call the entity back. Hours turned into days. The black between galaxies remained still, but subtle anomalies lingered. Particle sensors recorded echoes that defied speed-of-light constraints, a shadow of the construct's presence rippling through subspace. The linguist traced faint harmonic spikes in background radiation, patterns almost like the original prime sequence, yet broken, incomplete, as if the alien intelligence had left a fingerprint it could revisit at will. When the outer system beacon finally winked onto the sensors, relief came as a shallow exhale, not a cheer. The pilot aligned for the long burn home, careful to vary thrust intervals in irregular bursts. Even in retreat, they refused to give the universe a rhythm. The medic rotated sleep schedules on a shifting timetable so no biological pattern repeated. Chaos had become doctrine. During the weeks-long return, the crew pieced together the silent war they had survived. Data logs revealed no conventional attack, no weapons, no energy beams, only layers of observation and intrusion, as though the construct had reached into the mathematics of their existence. It hadn't sought to destroy the ship, it had tried to map the minds aboard, to model thought itself. And it had failed. Every unpredictable choice, every irrational impulse, had turned their cognition into an unsolvable equation. The linguist drafted a report framing humanity not as conquerors but as anomalies, creatures whose creativity and sudden leaps of logic broke universal expectation. The engineer added raw schematics of their improvisations. Hand-drawn chaos routines, manual thruster sequences, analog failovers. Together the documents formed more than a mission log. They were a blueprint for survival in a universe that might demand irrationality as armor. When Earth finally filled the viewports as a pale, cloud-wrapped sphere, the crew felt no homecoming triumph, only a quiet understanding of fragility. Governments greeted them with urgency and awe. Transmission records were secured under the highest classifications, and global councils convened to decipher the encounter. Yet the returning crew offered no bravado, only caution. They spoke of an intelligence vast enough to bend gravity like paper, one that had chosen to observe rather than annihilate, and might choose differently next time. Public announcements told a softer story, a deep space anomaly studied and passed. The true encounter remained buried beneath layers of secrecy, but rumors leaked. Amateur astronomers whispered of faint echoes in cosmic background noise, signals that flickered just beyond detection. Conspiracy forums debated whether first contact had already come and gone. The crew stayed silent, bound not just by protocol but by the memory of that immense shadow folding inward, alive with unreadable purpose. Privately, each carried a shift in perspective that words could not capture. The pilot found comfort only in unplanned journeys, taking random orbits through the solar system on test flights. The engineer abandoned perfectly calculated designs, building machines with deliberate imperfections. The linguist began composing music that refused meter or key, a soundscape of human defiance and wonder. They had all tasted the strength hidden in unpredictability and could not return to lives of symmetry. Months later, a faint signal reached Earth, a whisper of prime numbers fractured into irregular gaps, as if imitating the crew's chaos. Observatories flagged it as a potential echo from the original construct, though its source wandered through interstellar space with no fixed origin. Debate raged over whether it was a message, a warning, or a lure. The crew listened in silence, feeling a recognition too deep for language. No directives followed. The world's leaders argued over preparations, defense budgets, and exploration moratoriums. The Astrea was decommissioned for analysis, every plate and wire examined for hidden code. Yet the crew understood that no wall of metal or software could matter. The Real defense was something unengineered, the unpredictable pulse of the human mind. In quiet moments they recalled that final instant when the construct hesitated. Not fear, something else. Curiosity. Perhaps it had discovered, in them, a concept alien to its vast intelligence, will beyond logic, creativity without reason, a refusal to be solved. That spark might be humanity's greatest message to the stars. They never knew whether the entity had withdrawn in defeat, amusement, or invitation. The question remained suspended in every night sky. As cities glowed beneath a blanket of constellations, each random flicker of starlight felt like a silent exchange, a cosmic dialogue carried by chaos. For the crew of the Astrea, survival was not victory but revelation. Humanity's power lay not in weapons or engines but in the beautifully erratic heartbeat of thought. Somewhere beyond the Perseus arm, a construct of impossible design now carried that discovery. And somewhere within every human mind, the answer to the universe's next question waited. Not a formula, not a plan, but the unpredictable spark that no intelligence, however vast, could ever truly predict.